Nicholas Mahaffey. Sorry, Nicholas. I love these kind of problems. Questions. Bill, do you subscribe to the A theory or the B theory of time, and why? A theory states that time is a one-directional arrow that continues out into potential infinity by continuing on one event after another. B theory states that time is more akin to a yardstick with a beginning and end fixed in place, and that there is no definitive now, merely four-dimensional slices. The A theory makes a lot of sense in terms of our regular experience with our little monkey brains. The future seems to be it's certainly unknowable, and it seems to be undetermined yet. Hasn't happened yet, so it doesn't exist. The past has happened, and as we go through time, we make decisions and events happen, and they coalesce into what we call the past, and it's the arrow of time because chemical reactions can't run backwards and things like that. And that is without question the common sense view of what we perceive as time. And it makes so much intuitive sense that we don't even think about it. You know, I'm going to go someplace tomorrow on an airplane. The idea that I've already gone someplace on that airplane and come back is not something we can really particularly think about. However, I think all the evidence in the mathematics and the physics indicate that it's actually B. And this is something that we have to understand. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, obviously. But one of the things we have to understand, I think, is that humans have an astonishing ability to puzzle things out. Astonishing, a really miraculous ability to see into the deepest edges of the universe and into a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang and everything. It's astonishing, but ultimately, I think the best scientists are aware of this. We do have to understand that there are limitations to our cognitive ability. It's not a question of education or theory or process. It's not a question of how hard you think about it or even how bright you are. There are some things that are so far beyond our ability to comprehend. As I said on that afterburner I did with Howie with this little bird. This little bird is aware of certain things. The bird thinks I'm its mother. The bird is not aware of how this electricity works. The bird's not aware of radio signals coming through the room. And while I love my cats very much, no matter how much time I spend with them, I could never train them to fly an instrument approach. Not ever, no matter how much time I spent. They just don't have the brain power for it. And so we have the ability, I think, to understand this B theory. I don't have to explain A theory. Everybody understands it. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet, and nobody knows what it'll be because it hasn't happened yet. The idea that tomorrow has already happened, and here's the rub. The idea that tomorrow has already happened, that everything in the past and everything in the future has already happened, makes people think that it's fate, that it's fatalistic, that the bullet that's going to kill you is coming and it doesn't matter what you do. But this is where we run into our ability to not be able to process it. We believe it's true, we just can't really get our fingers around it. So here's the thing that I've come to believe, and I've studied this quite a bit for a layman. I believe that the universe was created intact, and that everything that happened in it was built all at the same time. And furthermore, everything that happened in this device called the universe happened as a result of free will. That the free will was baked into it. And so the thing that we have to understand, if we're really going to get into these areas of physics and things that are just, I love taking questions like this to try to get it down to something, a little more easy for lay people to understand, and certainly I'm one of them. If you think about there's so many great analogies for this, but if you think about the universe as a record that was pressed, it was just pressed out. You can relate to this, right? An LP. Most of you can't, but those of you who are old enough to remember the moon landing know what an LP is, and even you young people probably know what an LP is. At least you've seen one. So when you have an LP, you've got a black disc of vinyl, and it's stamped out. Now, consider that to be the universe. And when you put the record down on the needle and you play the album, you hear songs in the right order, and you can say, oh, I know the next song is coming up, or the song that I just listened to, I can remember that. But you can put that needle down anywhere you want to on the record, and no part of the record is more real than the other. It's just where the needle is at that particular time. So if you think of the universe as this kind of a 11-dimensional record that was just baked, done. We'll get to the when and the how in a minute. then you understand that there's no part of this in terms of time that's any more real than any other part. The stuff that happened yesterday is no more real than the stuff that happened tomorrow. It's no more real than the now. It's all there. It's always been there. It will always be there. And it's just a question of where our perceptions are as we're the needle and we move across the surface of this thing. If you, I've said this, I've mentioned this guy several times. I cannot recommend this highly enough. If you really want to open your mind to these kind of things, you have to go to YouTube and find a guy, a video called Imagining the 10th Dimension. And I think his channel is like called 10th Dimension. He's got 150 of these things. It's astonishing. And I have had my mind completely opened by this guy because it's very realistic, it's very scientific, it's very provable. So a lot of quantum physics now, scientists are saying that we can't solve these equations and factor time in. Time time appears to be a perceptual construct of us, given the fact that we live in we live in 4 dimensions. We live in 3 dimensions of space, and we're moving through the 4th dimension, which is time. But that is not a space. Time is not a separate dimension. It's just the direction we're moving through. For example, if I have a 2-dimensional cube and there's all little flatlanders in it, and I move this cube upwards, they're moving through the 3rd dimension. Their existence is moving through the 3rd dimension, but they're not. They're staying on a 2-dimensional plane interacting with each other. So there's a couple little things that are kind of fun when you talk about all this stuff. I mentioned the record thing. One of the things that this guy mentions, and it's a superb analogy, is we've all seen these little flip books, right? These 2-dimensional flip books where if you just flip them fast enough, and each page has a single still image on it that you can see a horse running or a little cartoon guy or whatever. And what this guy did in this video, Imagining the 10th Dimension, was he had a little flip book, and it's a flip. So imagine a flip book of a person's face. It was a drawing, but it could be a photograph. A face of the day they're born, and every single page, let's say, is another day in their lives, right? And so when you flip this thing, you will watch this person age in front of your eyes. They'll start out as a baby, a young man, an older man, middle-aged man, an old man, and then the day they die. And you can see the motion. You can see this person moving through time. But which one of these pictures is real? All of them are real. It's just you can go back and stop on one. You can go forward to one. You can run it backwards. You can do all kinds of things. And that seems to me to be the case, that our 3-dimensional space is just a series of slices in the 4th dimension that we're moving through at the rate of 1 second per second. And so the whole thing's built. Now, here's where we get into the stuff I think is really interesting, because many people have asked me about my belief in God, and I think I've told everybody I was raised as a Anglican at Church of England, in Bermuda. Went to church every day in Sunday school, and then I just stopped, and then I just stopped. And from the age of 16 or 17, right up until about the Howie Afterburner days, what was that, 50 years old, maybe 51, 52, somewhere in there, I was utterly convinced that God doesn't exist. We don't need him. We don't have any evidence for it, that the universe is mechanistic and completely rational, completely understandable. You take hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia, like the atmosphere of Jupiter, you put electric spark through it, out come the amino acids, you got everything you need. And I still believe that's true. Nothing I've changed, nothing I've come to think about since then has changed that. The mechanics of it, the mechanical aspect of it is all true. But here's the thing. Because I have a scientific background. I've always had a problem with faith, and finally I found some science that just made me think. We know early, when Heisenberg started playing around with quantum physics, we knew that if you tried to observe the position of an electron, you could determine its position but not its speed. If you tried to measure its speed, you couldn't determine its position. One locked out the other. As we've gotten more sophisticated, what we find is that by observing something, we change the result. The act of observing something changes the result. If we measure a particle, and these two particles are on separate sides of the universe, by measuring the spin or the polarity of one of them, the other one automatically changes its charge and becomes the other way. I've seen on video an experiment that simply blew my mind, and what it basically said was, light, there's a dualistic quality to light. Sometimes it's good to think of it as a series of particles, and other times think of it as a series of waves. But this is absolutely astonishing, and it's just true. I mean, I've seen the experiment. You can put light through a series of slits And the light will behave, I can't remember one or the other, I may have it backwards, but the argument's the same. Light will behave as a particle, let's say, until you observe it. Or if you even put a camera on it, then it will start to behave the other way. The act of observing something changes it. This is not up for discussion. The cell phones and the internet and all the stuff that we're using right now wouldn't work if this were true. When you get down to the quantum level, observing something changes the reality of it. It changes it. And it's easier for us when we deal with the very, very small to realize the effect that observing has on changing individual particles. But it does work its way up, and this is the whole idea between the idea of Schrodinger's cat. It's one of these things that just doesn't make any sense intuitively, and it's probably a really pretty poor example in some way, but as an example of this quantum state, the Schrodinger's cat experiment. Oh, for the love of God! Guess who didn't hit record today? This one's just going into the ether. This one's just for you folks. It may record, actually. Ustream may record it. We'll see. Anyway, so where was I? Oh, so what the argument is that if you put a cat in a box and you have a fuse with poison, and the fuse has a 50-50 chance of burning through and killing the cat, and if the box is closed, we don't know whether the cat is dead or alive until we open the box. That's obvious. But what they're basically saying is the cat is neither dead nor alive until you open the box. Now, a cat is an observer, and a cat has all kinds of other things, so it actually doesn't make any sense on a macro level. It's a handy little cheap analogy for things. But here's the point I'm trying to make, and then I'll move on. We know for a fact that the ability to observe something changes the outcome. There's no question about that. And so what I began to realize was it's pretty arrogant of me with my monkey brain the size of a cantaloupe to assume that I've got everything completely understood and the universe is absolutely understandable. It's an 11-dimension universe, which we occupy the third dimension of. There's not only an infinite series of possibilities in a universe, there's an infinite possibilities in infinite numbers of universes. And this is where the monkey brain runs out of horsepower. When we talk about the universe having always been there, when we talk about the past, the present, future is baked into this incredibly delicate and beautiful machine, and it was always there and it's always going to be there, this is where the monkey brain runs into the wall of our ability to process things. In other words, when you say the universe has always been there, there are two things that we want to ask. Three. One of them is, what's on the other side of the universe? If the universe is expanding, what's on the other side? The second question we want to ask is, well, if the universe has always been there, what was there before this thing appeared? And the third question we want to ask is, well, if this thing was here, who made it? Or what made it? And this is where we simply don't have the horsepower to understand it. We can talk about it as a model, but we can't really get it. What's on the other side of the expanding universe? Nothing. What do you mean, like a vacuum? No. Kind of a state with no... It doesn't exist. There's got to be something on the other side. There isn't, and your inability to comprehend that is not a failure of intelligence or a failure of trying hard enough. You don't have the neurons to completely comprehend the fact that there's nothing on the other side. Well, what was here before this universe was created, and what's going to be here after it's done? You can understand that it might go on forever. That's a little easier. But you can't understand that it was always there. What do you mean always? If it had to have been there, something must have happened before it was here. No. Well, how did it get there? It doesn't matter that we don't know. We just don't know. Somebody had to build it. Something had to happen. A Big Bang had to happen. What happened before the Big Bang? What happened before the Big Bang? Nothing. We can't get there. We can talk about it, and most scientists simply understand that they can't get there, and they just use it as shorthand from that point. But when you get down to the emotional aspect of it, you can't. You can't follow it. So to close this argument, what I believe is that the universe... that everything I've already done and everyone has already done and everything in the history of the universe from the first Big Bang to the, neutron death or whatever it is, proton death at the end of the universe, it's already happened. And it has always happened and it always will happen. Time is a little perceptive thing that I need in order to maneuver my way through this universe. but this three-dimensional aspect of the much larger universe, but it's not real in the sense of that. And strangely enough, I also believe that every action I take is in fact guided by free will. For example, I'm going to raise one of my hands right now. I was going to raise the left, but I'm going to raise the right. That decision was not predetermined. I made that decision in time, but that decision was built into the whole thing simultaneously. And now we just can't, well, wait, hold on. If it was already there, how could you just, no, all of it happened instantly at the same time. These decisions, who's going to win the Super Bowl, we don't know yet. And it's not predetermined, but it's already happened. Isn't that weird? That's what I actually believe. Turns out a couple people, thank you very much, have said they're recording this on their screen so we won't lose this little piece of wonder. It's a great idea. I love these kind of things. I think they really open your mind. Again, go to YouTube and look up Imagining the 10th Dimension, and he'll tell you why there are 11 dimensions. 10 dimensions? Yeah, there's a 0 dimension. It actually makes perfect sense, and as I've said before, watching it, I feel like a dog watching a Nova special on brain surgery. But I can get just enough of it, and I think you will too. And everything he does is just terrific. Moving on.